On our 59th day on the road with the pandemic, we are in the city of Pune, and it's a good time to talk to leading industrialist Rajiv Bajaj, who's of course also from Pune and has been one of the votaries against this prolonged lockdown. But at the moment, we have absolutely no clarity from the government on whether the lockdown will be eased. The Prime Minister alluded to a lockdown 4 that will be very different in shape and form, but we have absolutely no idea what the shape and form will look like and whether the state's chief ministers are going to venture to take the risk of easing the lockdown. Rajiv is with us now. Rajiv, you have been saying for long that the virus started the crisis, but the government propagated it with an unthinking absolutist lockdown. It looks like we're headed for a lockdown 4, though the Prime Minister says it won't be the same as before. Does this worry you, or does this make you feel a little better that at least it won't be the same as before?
Well, Barkha, you say this is the 59th day, and on the 59th day, the question in my mind is still unanswered, and it's a question I've been asking so many people in government and the government administration, which is simply this: what is the parameter or the metric based on which you will unlock? Because the lockdown in itself is not the issue, because to me, when you start something, the most important thing is to know how you're going to finish it. And everybody that I have spoken to, without exception, smiles back and says, we are confused, we have no idea, and our bosses have no idea. So I asked them that, for example, will you unlock only when we reach 0 or near 0 cases? Because that day is never going to come. Don't forget that the common flu is still coming back after 100 years. So this virus is not going to go away in a hurry. Are you going to unlock when cases start dropping off dramatically? That's not going to happen for months. So long as we can test enough people, we will find that cases are rising. Are you going to unlock when the doubling rate becomes 10 or 12 or 15 or something like that? Because when you unlock, 12 is going to go back to 6. So when you ask them these questions, they are absolutely at sea. You can ask any collector, any commissioner, anywhere this question. And frankly, I think in the world, nobody in government in any country has really articulated a simple response to this, that aisa hoga to I will start unlocking, which means that we are faced by the proposition that we are only going to go through a process of trial and error, and it is only when the realization and the acceptance comes of the fact that the lockdown is not going to get rid of the virus in a matter of 6 weeks, that slowly, reluctantly, with some form of face saving, the government will unlock. Now, that to me is not the educated and elegant way to do things.
So you're basically saying this is a lockdown without an exit strategy, and nobody you've spoken to has a clue as to how to take us through that exit door.
Yeah, maybe I'm talking to the wrong people. Now, obviously, I don't want to name them, but whether in the center or whether in my state of Maharashtra, I've spoken with, I think, some pretty senior, pretty seasoned, well-intentioned, extremely intelligent people. But, they've all kind of put their hands up and said that don't ask us this question. We don't know. We are just following orders.
Now, Rajiv, it's also that India locked down in a way that no other part of the world locked down. There have been lockdowns in America, there have been lockdowns in Europe, but by the way, large parts of Europe have started opening. In America, public transport never shut. The economic engine was never shut. Aviation was kept open. Even if nobody was flying, the engine was kept running. And that, to me, at least makes sense. Here, restarting the engine is going to be a nightmare. Let me ask you personally, when we spoke at the beginning of this crisis, you said you will not cut jobs, you will not cut salaries, and before you cut salaries, you would take a cut in your salary. How's that going for you so far?
Well, let me touch upon the first few points you made. Yes, I have been saying this, and I think it's common sense, that we should never have benchmarked the West, because whether it's our immunity or our temperature or our demography or other vulnerabilities or susceptibilities in medical terms, I think we are very unlike the West and very much more like the East, because we are an Asian country. And I think we panicked. looking at what was happening in Italy or France or Spain or UK or US, etc. But you are absolutely right. I mean, we all have friends there. Bajaj, of course, is a 50% partner in a company called KTM in Austria. And we know that the kind of extreme lockdown we have had here, which has caused so much inconvenience to so many people, has just not been the case in the West. And if one looks east, if you look at what's happening in Thailand or in Cambodia or in Vietnam or countries like that, or even Singapore, it's nowhere near what we have done. So I think we have inflicted a lot of pain, not only economic pain, social pain, emotional pain upon ourselves, which was entirely avoidable. And I think people have to be accountable for this. It's not fair, I mean, I took the liberty of saying to the police commissioner the other day that India is the capital of the world when it comes to fatalities from road accidents. Yet, in my 50 years in Pune, I have never seen the police being firm, if I may say so, about wearing helmets when they ride. But today, when a 60-year-old person is going out on a morning walk with nobody else, with a mask on his face, he's being humiliated, on the road. What can possibly justify behaving in this fashion with your own people? It makes no sense to me. Now, coming back to the question that you've asked, yes, ever since the lockdown came into force, we had contemplated the issue of both cutting back on jobs and also cutting back on salaries. In fact, our people had come forward right down to the level of the workmen to say that we are willing to take a voluntary cut in salaries. We kept this discussion open till the end of April, at which time we had to make a decision on what to do with April salaries. And, we decided to stay with our people because we are a profitable company in normal circumstances. We are a debt-free company. And we did not think it was necessary for us to throw the baby out with the bathwater at this time. So the short story is we have not cut back on any jobs, not one job, not even the contract workers that serve us in our canteens or that look after our gardens or, do these kind of what we call as non-production, non-core jobs. Not one contract worker, let alone a permanent colleague, has been let go of. And we have not cut any salaries at all.
But you've taken a salary cut.
Yeah, I have taken a 100% salary cut, but I don't talk about it anymore because, you've got these people out there who will immediately respond by saying, isko kya farak padta hai? He is a shareholder. He's got dividend coming to him. They don't even know that my father has kept all the shares with himself and I have no dividend, practically no dividend or very little dividend coming to me out of that. But it is better not to touch upon that subject because it unnecessarily gives people a chance to say things which are not called for.
Yeah, the Rajiv Bajaj, Rahul Bajaj dialogues we'll save for better times. More seriously, you have spoken about the confusion in the reopening of factories, right? So technically, economic activity is being encouraged in some sort of limited way, especially in green zones. But on ground, this is leading to all sorts of chaos. I have many friends who run small and medium factories, and they're saying that there's absolute chaos about actually reopening the factories. Workers are scared to even go to factories, those workers who haven't left because they feel they'll get hauled up by the police. And in general, there's this environment of fear and paranoia, so factories are not able to open. Has Bajaj been able to start production, open factories?
In a small way, yes. And here I must say that the administration has been very, very helpful. Unlike in answering the question on when to unlock, because frankly, it's not up to them. I think that's really a political passing the buck game. We can talk about that more. But when it comes to action on the ground to enable industry, we have 3 plants. So in Uttarakhand, we can operate at full capacity if we want to. So that's been fantastic. Aurangabad also, we've had fantastic support over there from the local administration. I would say we are probably at 20% capacity there. It's nowhere near normal, but it does bring a certain rhythm into the operation when you're at 20% capacity. So that's good under the circumstances, I would say. The slowest off the block was our headquarter here, where we have the R&D, etc., at Pune, outside the PMC limits actually in Pimpri Chinchwad, and also our plant at Chakan. But even here, because Pune has been a bit of a hot spot, so I can understand people being cautious. But even here, the administration has been very, very helpful. The problem, though, is I think more the overall guideline that comes from the center. Because when we are Barkha, when we're talking about health, we have to probably talk in terms of zones, in terms of watching them, monitoring them, testing, and kind of facilitating the lives of people in the zones. But when we are talking about industry, and particularly a multi-tiered industry like Bajaj, that has sub-dealers, then dealers, then there is the OEM, then there is a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 supplier. So you're talking about a chain across zones. So I have a situation today over here where on one day, 4 suppliers of a certain so-called red zone are suddenly not allowed to open shop by their local MLA. Although the local MLA had absolutely no local standing to do this, but he does it out of sheer ignorance and perhaps a need to flex his muscle at this opportune time for himself. So suddenly 4 suppliers are shut for 3 days. So I cannot make any motorcycle today. Tomorrow, some people are going to work, they go to a bus stop. Again, they are confronted by some people who say, "Kaam pe nahi jana hai," So again, people cannot turn up. Again, you cannot produce. On another day, something will happen somewhere in Ahmedabad, and parts that are supposed to come from Vapi, etc., are suddenly stopped in transit on the highway, and we cannot get it. So it doesn't matter whether it's one cable, one harness, one nut bolt, or one muffler. Unless the whole chain acts in unison, the motorcycle cannot be produced. This is the nature of the auto industry. So this is the problem we have right now, that although when we approach for assistance and approvals on a piecemeal basis, we find that the authorities are coming forward very willingly, but they are not yet able to take a holistic view. And what I mean, for example, is they should say to themselves, okay, let's get industry working to 30% capacity. And then across all zones, you have to ensure that you give us the permission in terms of people and goods movement to achieve 30%. Unless you start from that starting point, you are not going to be able to achieve a uniform output. So I can't give you a number. I mean, I can tell you, for example, yesterday we were at 15% capacity, but I can't tell you that the average is 15% because it changes a lot every day.
Now, you use this phrase, a political passing of the buck, right? And I want to understand more from you what you meant. And, just to share a little experience of mine, I've traveled, this is the 8th, Maharashtra is the 8th state I've traveled through. And if there's one thing I'm convinced of, it's that the humanitarian crisis and the economic crisis that we are seeing unfold is way bigger. It's way, way, way bigger than anything that the virus can do to us. I think we have enough data, we have enough data that we can look at even in terms of the fatalities. When you say a political passing of the buck, what do you mean? Do you mean that the states are waiting for the center and the center is waiting for the states?
Well, the short answer is yes, because I think we have started off in March on the premise that if we were to shut down or lock down for 3 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, we are probably going to see the end of the virus. It has started from there. So we have started off in a very center-heavy, top-down fashion. What we can see is that when you have a lockdown that is porous, as this has been, because this has not been an absolute lockdown, then there is always a leakage of the infection and the virus continues to survive. In this situation, cases will rise. And with every passing day, with the media playing this up saying, yesterday was the highest, now today has superseded that, and tomorrow will be even higher, I think there is no face saving for the government that, as cases are rising and deaths are rising, how do you unlock? So what I see as a common person who is observing what is coming in the media and what is apparently being discussed, between the center and the states is that the center or the prime minister, let's say, is waiting for chief ministers to take a stand. And chief ministers, particularly what one observes is the non-BJP chief ministers, are in turn the first to suggest an extension of the lockdown, almost as if they are baiting the prime minister to reverse their decision. So this is the game of ping pong, which seems to be going back and forth. Because as a citizen or as a business person, I am not hearing data and logic that, okay, if we were to flatten the curve, then we are 1.4 billion people, X% of them are vulnerable. Out of that, even if 20% are to be protected, or we have to be ready in terms of medical infrastructure, that's probably like 50, 60 million people, as against which we have so many beds, so many nurses, so many ventilators. I mean, nobody's giving us any data or any logic. All they are discussing is whether it should be extended or not. And again, in a piecemeal, arbitrary, erratic fashion, train shuru hoga, band hoga, repatriation hoga, nahi hoga, quarantine hoga, nahi hoga. These are all pieces of the puzzle. These are all parts of the elephant. But nobody is speaking cohesively about the elephant at all. They are just passing the buck to each other. In fact, the only one who has stood up and made a point, I would say, is Arvind Kejriwal in Delhi. When Saturday before last, he said that, look, enough is enough. I have used this time to ready myself. Delhi is ready, come what may, and we have to learn to live with this virus, and we are going to move forward and unlock progressively. I mean, he's the only one that has made a cohesive, coherent, composite statement. I have not heard it from anywhere else.
Do you believe the lockdown was pointless? The 3 phases of the lockdown were pointless?
I think the lockdown was not well planned or executed for the following reasons. First of all, I continue to believe that we reacted by watching the West, which was really not relevant to us. Secondly, the virus does not kill zones. The virus kills people. The concern was about the elderly and the vulnerable. There should have been a very concerted attempt to identify the elderly and the immunocompromised or the vulnerable, as they say, and make sure that they are secured. It was really not necessary in a country where the average age is only 28 to have all these, let's talk about these migrants or contract workers, millions of them, probably in the age of 20 to 40 or 20 to 50 or so, being locked up. This was done ostensibly, as I understand it, for 2 reasons. One is it is being said that, in India, everybody lives with their parents and grandparents and, it's all that sort of thing. So how can you ensure that the old are okay when they are living in the same house as the young? And, my point is, come on, give people that much credit, if somebody is smoking, he doesn't smoke in front of his father and blow smoke in his face. People know how to look after their own. And if somebody felt that he's not in a position to do that, he would not go to work. But for this reason, you have apparently 120 million jobless people at the end of 8 weeks. I think that's absolutely, ridiculous. So I think this is the first problem with this concept. And the second is, we have been told from the beginning that this is all being done to flatten the curve. Barkha, the math just doesn't add up. 1.4 billion people, if you put the math on it, what you will see is to flatten the curve means to create a medical infrastructure to probably deal with 4 or 5 million people every month. And still you would need a year's lockdown. So first of all, a year's lockdown is, I think, it's impossible, unrealistic. But where will we create that infrastructure? It is just by God's grace that we did not have those kind of deaths or those kind of serious symptomatic people. And therefore, my point is that we have actually, instead of flattening the curve, we have peaked the curve because we have kept everyone home. We have kept the young and the robust at home. We have kept the elderly and the immunocompromised at home. And now, however reluctantly, in some form or fashion, when we unlock, especially as we get closer to the monsoons, which brings its own dengues and diarrheas anyway, we are suddenly going to expose everybody all at the same time. And I am afraid that we are going to have a tsunami of a curve. Now, again, you and I are just laymen when it comes to understanding epidemics, but I would very much like to hear somebody competent in government or in some lab somewhere stand up and say, you are wrong and this is the reason you are wrong. We are waiting to hear such reassurance, but nobody is coming forward and saying anything.
Does the government seem confused to you, or you think they're guessing? Do you think they're groping in the dark?
I mean, I don't know what is the difference between being confused and groping in the dark and guessing. It's all the same. But anyway, their motivation is not known to me. I can't read their mind. But what I can see is neither the reason to lockdown was clear, nor to benchmark the West was clear, nor how the math adds up in terms of flattening the curve was clear, nor it is clear why we will unlock now when the cases are more than ever before, nor it is clear 2 weeks from now what we should expect. So there has been a complete lack of clarity in the last 8 weeks. And it is this uncertainty that creates more fear than anything else, So if we would have had more information, more data, more logic on the actual things that matter on the ground to deal with the crisis, I think all of us would have slept a little easier.
I agree with you on that. Let me ask you this: the fiscal attention has been almost as much in the West as it has been on the pandemic. You have the Trump administration talking every day about the economy. You have the Fed stepping in, to do its own thing. We've seen some signs and some movements of that with the RBI. You have now the Prime Minister talking about a 20 lakh crore package. The detail is still sort of awaited. It's going to come bit by bit every day. Are you reassured? Where do you stand vis-a-vis the economy?
See, let me tell you this, that almost a month back, my counterpart, Stefan Pierer at KTM, he said to me that amongst other things, they were assured by the government that they would be reimbursed 85% of the wages of their employees. I spoke with him just a couple of hours before today. And he told me that that has been done. And salaries of an average European employee is very, very high. And yet the government has come forward and done that. Stefan, in fact, let me know that Europe since Monday is now back to normal. He said KTM is 100% there as far as offices and factories are concerned. Dealerships are open, including in Spain and France, etc. It is only Italy which is lagging. And I don't want to take up more time on this, but the growth rates we are seeing for our products in Europe, US, China are very heartening right now. For example, in the US, as you mentioned, and I believe even in Japan, money has gone directly to the people, $1,000 a person or whatever it is, the numbers which one here. So you see these kind of things as a engineer, this economics, I call it a Sida economics. I understand that you give the money either in the hand of the person or in the hand of the employer. But it is perhaps my ignorance of economics or matters concerning that what we hear over here, ये घूम फिर के stimulus जो है ना, which is supposed to arise from here, go there, convert into this and then come to you in that way at that point of time. Ye kab it will come on the ground, when will it actually have impact, how it will have impact. Frankly, it is not clear to me. I would say this is more a problem of my understanding and comprehension of these matters. But I cannot help but feel something that is more simple, specific and sustainable, if it had come directly, as I hear from the US or Austria or Japan, I think would have been more meaningful. I mean, another way to put it can be, in medical terms, it is said when you are not well, there are two parts to the illness. There is a chronic part to it, which will take time to heal. And there is an acute part to it. That acute may be a high fever, or you may have broken an arm or a leg. That has to be dealt with immediately. Now, you may ice it or you may take some medicine for it, but that has to be dealt with immediately. I think whatever we may do for the chronic issue, because definitely this is an issue that is going to last for months. People say even for 2 years or 3 years, at least for industries like aviation and hospitality and things like that. So that's fine. I mean, some things are chronic, they will take time. But what about the acute stuff? In terms of companies have zero revenue, they have losses, they have debts, people don't have jobs and they don't have salaries. This is the acute stuff that should be dealt with immediately. I don't think I have heard any announcement in this respect.
Has anything you've heard so far made you feel even a little better about the acute stuff?
See, when somebody says that we are going to put out 20 lakh crore, I would like to believe that at least some part of it would be real and would be effective. But I have not yet heard from even those who understand, not that I have had occasion to talk to too many people, but I have not heard anybody say, wow. Whereas when I spoke with Stefan Pierer, again, I give you this example, because it's first-hand example. His exact words to me a month back was, Rajiv, we have had so much assistance from the Chancellor and from the government, we have nothing left to ask for. And Stefan is a very, very cutthroat businessman. To hear someone like him say, I have nothing left to ask of my government, I mean, that said a lot to me, I'm not hearing that here.
Now, for capitalism also, there's a morality test at play here. When you see millions of migrant workers walking the highways, it's taken 50 days of constant reporting by some of us to get the government to pay attention. Even on this, we've seen flip-flops. Initially, they were told to stay where they are. Then they were told to leave. Then when they left, we said there's no social distancing. Then they were told to stay where they are. Now, finally, trains are being organized. Now, in the middle of all this, chambers of commerce want orders for workers to come back forcibly, one. And two, some states are talking about a dilution in labor law. Where do you come in on this?
I have been asked this question on the labor laws particularly. I have to say, first of all, that I have not looked at the details of it. So I don't want to, jump the gun and comment, but I will say this. I think we have mastered the art of swinging from one end of the pendulum to the other. What I mean is that when we put up assembly or CKD facilities in some other countries, as we went global, we saw even in large ASEAN markets, like in Indonesia, for example, it was possible to hire and fire people depending on how demand changed or the fortunes of your own business changed. But you had to do it in a humane way. There was some social security, satisfactory social security in one manner or the other that took care of the individual's needs, but did not become restrictive for the companies. We somehow failed to find this middle path. Either you have one extreme where there is no hire and fire, business has no elbow room at all, and this leads to, lack of competitiveness or poor productivity, etc., etc. So this is what we have all lived with for a long time. Now we seem to have swung. I don't say we have, because as I said, I'm not very conversant with what has been announced, but we seem to have gone to the other extreme, where I understand that practically everything to do with the normal, what can be called as human requirements of a workman in terms of his coming to work, his number of hours at work, his transport, his food, his breaks, his leaves. I mean, virtually everything has been thrown out. I mean, if this is the case, I think this is ridiculous. I don't think anybody can build a world-class business with third-class policies like this. And I think it is only, very short-term oriented people who cannot see beyond their nose who are going to act in this fashion. You are not going to get anybody competent, anybody of integrity, anybody with commitment to come and make your company world-class. So, finally, what they say, what cannot be cured must be endured. I think there are some very erratic things about governments, and I don't mean only this government, it has been with the past governments also, which will never be cured for whatever are their compulsions. We have to endure it. And again, it would be a very long discussion, but at Bajaj Auto, we have managed to move away from this kind of a adversarial relationship with our people to a very much more partnership-like collaborative relationship. And that is why today at our plants, you can see that every man down to the last man who's working on the station, on the assembly line, is responsible for his work, its output, its quality, the maintenance of the equipment, the safety, the health, the hygiene. Self-management is the only way to work in a knowledge economy, in an economy where we need to improve every day, and be a little better today than we were yesterday. How are you going to get people out of their bed every morning, coming to work saying, I'm going to do a little better today than I did yesterday, if this is the kind of nonsense that's going to happen? So again, I don't know the details, but I was very dismayed to hear that.
finally, on an unconnected subject, when we spoke the last time, you made a huge push for homeopathy as a preventive, if not a therapeutic. And I think you've kind of tried both at your own level. It took a long time for the government to actually agree, for officials to actually agree that, look, we can try this. And from my understanding, this is now being tried on an experimental basis. It's not really being prescribed. Where does this stand now, and what are you doing to push it ahead, and why are you pushing it ahead?
Well, homeopathy has come a long way in the last few weeks. I think this one of the, if one may say so, the positive things out of this crisis has been that it has brought homeopathy mainstream. Today, virtually every day, there is a discussion about employing homeopathy, both as preventive and curative in the current situation. 6 weeks, 8 weeks back, homeopathy was like out of sight, out of mind. It was a peripheral subject. Secondly, the government, particularly people at Niti Aayog, people at the Health Ministry, and especially at Ayush, Dr. Kotecha, Dr. Khurana at CCRH, etc., have been extremely supportive. And while it has taken a few weeks, I think that's fine, because we have done something that has never happened before, which is to grant homeopathy and homeopaths the approval to access patients at hospitals, corona patients, and to have homeopathy there as an added treatment to ascertain its effectiveness. Now, this to me is a huge leap forward for mankind, even if a small step for homeopathy, because even if it is not in good time for this problem, but through this process over the next couple of months, I have no doubt homeopathy will prove its effectiveness. And this means that for all time to come, India will have at its disposal a therapy which is known to be a very gentle, very deep acting, and a very lasting therapy, which is affordable by all. Today the homeopathy pills that we have distributed, for example, preventively, to almost 500,000 people, mostly in Maharashtra, the cost of treatment of a person with that is just 2 or 3 rupees. It's almost laughable. I mean, 25,000 people at Bajaj and their families have been given this remedy, Camphor 1M particularly. And we are monitoring them as best we can in these times. So far, we have no reports of anybody developing symptoms. The first person to encourage me in this direction was actually the Police Commissioner of Pune, Dr. Venkatesham, with whom I had a little update yesterday. He told me that out of the 9,000 police force in Pune, only 10 had developed symptoms, out of which 5 had not taken the camphor for whatever reason. So he was very happy. I am now trying to supply 225,000 vials to the Mumbai and Maharashtra police, because they are very encouraged by the Pune example. And yesterday, Dr. Venkatesham let me know that the DGs of Haryana, Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, etc., they all want the Camphor 1M for their frontline people, encouraged by what's happened in Pune. So I could give you many more examples of other organizations along the same lines. Let me also tell you, for example, Brazil is distributing in a particular province to 2 million people Camphor 1M, in the hope or in the effort to immunize them. And we have had a lot of success, or rather Dr. Rajan Sankaran, who is the leader of this whole effort as a homeopath based out of Mumbai. He has been treating people starting with Iran and various places in Europe. So both in preventive terms and curative terms, we've had a lot of success. We had a lot of joy. But I will hasten to add one thing, that all said and done, at the end of the day, this is still very anecdotal. However compelling it might be, we need to go through a scientific process of trial. Fortunately, that has now begun. I am not really qualified to talk about it. That is being led by Dr. Rajan and his team. And I am very sure that in a couple of months, they will have a wonderful result.
I think I need to pick up a Camphor 1M vial from you as well, because we are going to keep traveling on the road. Rajiv Bajaj, thank you. The one thing the virus hasn't changed is that you remain as plain spoken as ever. So I'm sure you're going to be in a lot of trouble for everything you've said in this interview. And I guess that's part of life.
You bring out the best in me, Barkha. What can I say? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.